This is Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here to talk about the first night of the Major League Baseball draft from a Southeastern Conference lens. By my count, 28 of the 68 guys drafted on Sunday night have SEC ties either as players or commits. And let's get right into it. You can see some of the picks scrolling across the bottom. I didn't have time, or rather room, to get everybody in there. It was that good of a night for the SEC. But you can see, I think, the top 52 or so, or 55 picks in terms of the guys that were picked within the SEC. You can see along the bottom of the screen, but there were more. Let's get into the story of the night. That, of course, was LSU. So much talk about teammates going 1-2 in the Major League Baseball draft. That had never happened before. There was talk it would not because of Dylan Cruz's alleged demands for a lot of money. Of course, as you know, slotting and what guys or teams are willing to pay has a lot to do with where you're drafted. And there was talk that Cruz could drop a little bit. And what ended up happening is Paul Skenes went first to the Pirates and Cruz went second to the Nationals. And an interesting thing on Skenes, he is saying that he would like to play two ways at the major league level. And that's going to be interesting because, remember, he did that at Air Force before becoming an LSU Tiger, and it really worked out to his advantage last year, as his coach Jay Johnson pointed out on the MLB telecast, that with more focus on pitching, he got a lot better. So the problem is, of course, guys like to hit and pitch, and Skenes is one of those guys. So we'll see how that plays out at the major league level. But it's funny, Skenes was a guy that if you watched him all year, you just thought, how could this guy not go 1-1? And there was a lot of, mixed opinions over the last few weeks. You saw Skenes being as low as 5 in certain mock drafts, and what was a banner year for prospects, for sure. A lot of that dates back to the COVID draft of 2020 with the shortened 5 rounds and maybe guys going to college that wouldn't have otherwise. And so we saw that all show up in this draft. But Skenes is a generational pitcher is the thought. I would agree with that. And now there's talk that he is going to be a two-way player too. All right, Dylan Cruz, I've said this many times. Dylan Cruz, in my mind, is the best SEC player of the last 20 years in terms of career value. Like, if we had a war for college baseball, I think Dylan Cruz would have had the best WAR numbers over the last 20 years. Who knows, maybe all time. I don't know what Frank Thomas would have put up at Auburn or whatever, but he's the best I've seen. And he went number 2 overall to the Nationals, which was good to see. I hate to see it when there's just such a great imbalance in terms of what guys get or where they're picked in the draft. And where they should be because of slotting and all those things. But in any case, Cruz went second to the Nationals. I think he'll be a terrific major league player, and I think he'll be that very soon. It'll be interesting, back to Skenes for a minute, to see when he gets promoted to the bigs. I was looking that up this morning. It's Monday morning, to see if there was any talk of him becoming a Pirate this year. I haven't seen it. Maybe it's just too early. But I want to see when these guys both get to the majors because, man, when I watch them, and I watched them a lot, I don't see much holding either of them back from being productive major leaguers right now, and especially that being the case for Skenes. Okay, more LSU news. Man, what a night it was for the Tigers. Ty Floyd went 38th overall. That's the competitive balance round A to the Reds, who are just racking up pitching lately. Actually, they've been racking up middle infielders and probably need a little bit more pitching, but they've got some good young arms. Ty Floyd's performance in Omaha apparently enough to rocket him up from maybe that, 75, 80 pick range to where he went at 38. So congrats to him. And here's another interesting thing. Grant Taylor, who never threw a pitch for the Tigers last year because he was hurt, was tremendous last fall from what I heard. He goes to the White Sox at 51 overall after not throwing a pitch again last season. So Grant Taylor, that just tells you a lot about the talent. And boy, how many heartaches might Jay Johnson have been spared during the regular season had Grant Taylor been available. Of course, LSU won the national title anyway, and it didn't matter. But he was a big missing piece of what LSU did last year, and you can see the regard that the pros had for him based on where he went. Now, it was not all in all a good night for LSU. I mean, all in all it was, of course, but across the board it was not. In terms of LSU lost Blake Mitchell, He went 8th overall to the Royals. He's a catching prospect. Of course, LSU's got a couple of good catchers on the roster. It signed a couple last year, so I think that Jay Johnson will adjust just fine. But seeing Blake Mitchell go 8th overall to the Royals, I think that probably tamps down any thought that he might go to Baton Rouge, and I'm guessing LSU wasn't expecting that anyway. And so we'll watch today being Monday, to see where Cameron Johnson goes. He is probably the top remaining undrafted guy with SEC ties. He's a top 50 prospect, so we'll see if he goes off the board on Monday, which I would expect that he would. Okay, I don't think anybody across the board other than LSU had a better night than Florida. I guess the difference between the Tigers and the Gators is the Gators had nothing go wrong just yet. LSU had a better night, obviously, in the draft in terms of current players with that 1-2 punch at the top, but Florida got 3 guys drafted early, and maybe this is the separator a little bit between them and LSU in terms of the bad news portion of the night, although I expect some of that will be coming probably Monday or Tuesday. Florida didn't have any commits taken on Monday. Who they did have taken were 3 current players. Wyatt Langford went 4th overall to Texas. I think he can be a real star in this game. Just a power-hitting bat, maybe the best one in the draft, considering he's been there to college and proven that he can do it, so we'll see how that goes. Hurston Waldrep went 24th overall to the Braves. As a Braves fan, I endorsed that pick. I thought Waldrep, based on where you saw him go in mocks and in rankings, would have been off the board by the Braves' 24th pick. You saw them connected a lot to maybe prep outfielders and things like that, but with Hurston Waldrep on the board and that split change and that fastball combo, and he's got a 3rd and 4th pitch too, I think. That's hard not to pass up there. And, of course, the Braves have done a tremendous job developing players, and so I think Hurston Waldrep is a terrific fit for Atlanta. And, again, as a Braves fan, very excited to have him there. The thing that made me laugh last night regarding the Gators was Brandon Sproat, who turned down the Mets a year ago, came back to Florida, and guess what? The Mets picked him again this year, this time in the 2nd round instead of the 3rd. So Sproat does not have the leverage that he would have had a year ago. So I will presume he would sign with the Mets this time, but just kind of funny to see the Mets take Sproat again after him spurning New York a year ago. Okay, 2 schools had particularly rough nights. And I'll start with the one in my hometown of Nashville. That's Vanderbilt. Started well in some ways for the Commodores. Well, it didn't, actually. Max Clark went 4th to the Tigers, but I think everybody had built that in as an expectation. There was talk he would go 1-1 overall. When the guy shows up to the draft broadcast in the tux, you're pretty well assured that the guy is planning on going pro. So Max Clark, one of the best prep players ever in the history of the Midwest. He's an Indiana kid. He went to the Tigers at 4, so that was a kid who was technically a Vandy commit, who was probably not going to go there, of course. But that's how Vandy's night started. Then Enrique Bradfield Jr., Vanderbilt center fielder, goes 17th to the Orioles, and I think he'll be a fine major league player. I think with the rules changes, the shift on all those things coming back, I think those are the things, the stolen base rules, that will benefit a kid like Enrique Bradfield Jr. He played hurt last year, didn't really look completely himself, changed his swing a little bit to try to drive the ball more. I think if Enrique Bradfield Jr. gets back to doing what he did his first 2 years and is healthy, that'll be a fine pick for the Orioles. Okay, Vandy's night was not over in terms of losing commits. George Lombard to the Yankees at 26, Thomas White to the Marlins at 35, and Alex Clemmie to Cleveland at 58. So the Commodores lose 4 commitments. I think that was the most of any team in the SEC last night except for one. Arkansas also lost 4 commits. And it started okay for the Razorbacks. The first couple hours, you're going, okay, nobody's taken yet. Surely that's not going to last. But they had some guys that could have gone early, Walker Martin being one of those guys. But Arkansas lost Aiden Miller, Nazan Zantello, Kendall George, and Martin. Hope I got Zantello's name right. That's a tough one to pronounce. But those guys went to the Phillies, Red Sox, Dodgers, and Giants, respectively. And again, those guys can turn down the money to sign. But major league clubs generally don't pick guys on day 1 and really day 2 for that matter, who are not going to sign, and so you would have to figure Arkansas is going to lose those guys. Now, Arkansas did get Jax Wiggins drafted He went 68 overall to the Cubs. I think the next to last pick of the night. And Jax Wiggins, a guy that would have been probably starting the year as the Friday night starter for Dave Van Horn a year ago, but he got hurt, I believe, right before the season started, didn't throw a pitch. But Jax Wiggins, an elite talent in terms of the arm speed and stuff. I think he had 100 or came close to it in 2022. I think it really progressed, and the hope was he would become the best version of himself in college that we've seen last year. We never got a chance to find that out because he got hurt. So Jax Wiggins goes to the Cubs late in round 2. Congratulations to him. Anyway, rough night for Vandy and Arkansas, each losing 4 commits. There was one other team that lost multiple commits. Actually, there were 2 of them. Ole Miss and Auburn. Auburn's night particularly the toughest. Kevin McGonigal went to the Tigers and infielder Colt Emerson to Seattle. Emerson went in the first round. I think McGonigal did too. So Auburn got 2 high-profile commits. Its 2 highest-profile commits taken and did not have any current players taken. I think you'll see Cole Foster go off the board on Monday. And for Ole Miss, Xander Muth and Josh Noth, a pair of prep right-handers, both went last night. Jacob Gonzalez, their fine shortstop, goes 15th overall to the White Sox, about in the range that people had projected him, maybe a pick or 2 lower than some would have thought. So anyway, Ole Miss and Auburn both lose their top commits to the draft. I say lose. Again, we'll see if these guys sign or don't sign, but you would expect them to. 2 other guys of note in terms of current players who went on Monday night. Chase Dollander went 9th to the Rockies, and Colton Ledbetter, Mississippi State's outfielder, went 55th to the Rays. We'll start with Ledbetter. The Rays are maybe the shrewdest organization around at finding talent and undervalued guys. And Ledbetter is a guy that's, I don't know if throwback's the right word, but you're seeing a return to more of what we're used to in Major League Baseball in terms of more contact, stolen bases, emphasis on fielding, those kind of things. Ledbetter is a really, really good all-around guy. I don't know if there's like one super, super loud tool, but he's really patient at the plate and uses all fields, and he's a little bit more of a guy that would have fit really well in baseball 20 or 30 years ago, rather than this launch angle era that we're in. But anyway, the Rays kind of went that direction. I think he's a really solid player. I don't know if he's an all-star or anything like that. With the Rays, you never know because they have a habit of turning guys into all-stars. But I thought that was a really solid pick for the Rays, and it's always very interesting to see who the Rays value and like. So to me, that was an endorsement of Colton Ledbetter's talent. Now, the other one, Chase Dollander, who went 9th overall to the Rockies. Dollander was in that conversation for 1-1 before the season. Just a tremendous right-hander with, at times, pinpoint control, elite stuff, high 90s fastball, good secondary pitches. Just has the ability to put the ball right on the edge of the black when he wants to. It seemed like 2 years ago. Now, he walked about twice as many in terms of rate this last year. He said they did the year before. Didn't go as deep into games as maybe you would have expected. And frankly, if you could chase Dollander, look, you're happy to get taken in the top 10th, but man, the Rockies are not a great organization for developing talent, period. And Colorado is the place where pitching careers go to die. Based on the altitude, based on the dimensions, it's a park where the ball carries out, of course, because of the thin air, and Chase Dollander was very home run prone. That's one reason I was a little surprised to see the Rockies take him there. The ball got out on him a lot, and not just at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. And sometimes that's what happens to guys that are around the zone is you get hit hard for home runs, and what you want to do is make those solo shots, and maybe that's where it works for Dollander. I'm not doubting the talent at all. Just you can probably count on one hand the number of pitchers who've really shown in Colorado. You got to be special. Dollander is that, but just the Rockies as an organization are on probably my top 2 or 3 lists of teams that do not do a good job of developing young talent. And, of course, you've got that pitching situation, which has been in play for Colorado ever since it had a major league franchise, in 1993. Everybody's had trouble pitching in that park. So if I'm Chase Dollander, I'm sure he's not going to say it publicly, but I think just about any scenario other than the one that he got dealt, would have been preferable, but we'll see if he can buck the trend and be an effective major league pitcher in that environment. Okay, a couple other teams that lost their top players. Alabama lost its top commit. That's two-way player Bryce Eldridge. He went middle of the first round to the Giants. And interestingly, the Mets took Colin Houck, who was Mississippi State's top commit. He was projected as a mid-first rounder, went, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 picks lower than where we would have thought perhaps. He goes to the Mets. He's a shortstop prospect, and it's interesting because the Mets also took another Mississippi State shortstop commit in Jet Williams a year ago, so Mississippi State has now lost its shortstop commit 2 years in a row in the first round to the Mets, and so interestingly enough, we'll see how that goes. Houck, again, was drafted a little bit below where he was projected, and I'm going to look this up as we're doing it. He went, 32nd. Yeah, I think he was projected somewhere around 16-ish. So anyway, a little bit of a value there for the Mets in terms of where they got him. So interesting to see the Mets take a Mississippi State shortstop commit 2 years in a row. All right, lots more stuff to come. You've got a lot of teams that are going to be nervously awaiting to see where their commits get picked today. That's probably most of the SEC teams. Georgia might be an exception. Kentucky might be an exception. Kentucky, of course, is going to use the portal, I'm sure. But the draft resumes. Rounds 3 to 10 start at 1 Central on Monday. And then rounds 11 through 20 finish up the draft. That also starts at 1 on Tuesday. I think the only way you can catch that is at MLB.com. I don't know, the network might have it, but I think you've got to watch that streaming at MLB's website, which I will be doing, and we'll follow up with a wrap-up of what happens on Monday and Tuesday. Best way to get those, hit the subscribe button to our channel, enable your notifications, so we'll be back with analysis of those. We've got football content coming up this week. We've been putting that out for a couple of weeks. We've got plenty more to come, and basketball as it happens. We are your one-stop shop for Southeastern Conference football, men's basketball, and baseball. Hit the like button. That helps us get noticed if you don't mind, please. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again with more men's sports content.